a conflict raging halfway across the globe, and a quiet cornfield in Iowa. Now, you might be thinking, what in the world do those two have to do with each other? Well, a geopolitical shock like this can send ripples through the economy in some really surprising ways. Today, we're going to unpack this unexpected story, a story that connects a distant conflict directly to the American farmer's wallet.
This quote from analyst Josh Linville, it just hits you, right? It perfectly captures that feeling of immediate crisis. But why the worst time? Well, it's all about timing. This whole thing is blowing up right as farmers are making their final calls, buying their seeds and supplies for spring planting. That means the timing just magnifies the impact of every single price swing.
Okay, let's take a look at this chart to see what that shock actually looks like. That red line? That's the price of Brent crude oil right after the conflict kicked off. See how it just rockets past $110 a barrel? It happens in just a matter of days. And that isn't just a number on a screen, it's the first domino in a huge economic chain reaction.
So, that initial spike in energy prices, that's the first domino to fall, and it sends a jolt through the entire agricultural economy. Let's call this first part a shock to the system.
32%. Just let that sink in for a second. That is a massive, almost overnight price spike for something that is absolutely essential to modern farming, nitrogen fertilizer.
And this is what that 32% actually means in dollars and cents. A jump from $516 to $683 per metric ton. For a farmer, this isn't like paying a few extra bucks for diesel at the pump. No, this is a fundamental threat to the profitability of their biggest and most important crops.
So how in the world does a conflict in the Middle East make fertilizer prices explode in the Midwest? It all comes down to the supply chain. So let's trace how this global chain reaction actually works.
And this lays it out perfectly. Okay, step 1. The conflict shuts down the Strait of Hormuz. That's a critical choke point for global energy. Step 2. That immediately disrupts the flow of liquefied natural gas, or LNG. And then step 3, and this is the absolute kicker. Natural gas makes up 70 to 80% of the cost of making nitrogen fertilizer. So you disrupt the gas and you get step 4, fertilizer costs going through the roof. Simple as that.
So with costs just exploding, you'd think the story ends there, right? Pain for farmers, end of story. But this is where things get way more interesting. Because farmers aren't just passive victims here. They've got a playbook. They've got strategies to adapt, which brings us to our next section.
And this really gets to the heart of what we're talking about today. Does a huge cost shock like this automatically mean a disastrous year for farmers? Your first instinct is to say, well, yeah, of course. But the real story, it's a lot more complicated than that. When prices shift this much, this fast, farmers adapt. They've basically got two big moves they can make. They can stick with planting corn, super productive, high-yield crop, but it guzzles that now insanely expensive nitrogen. Or they can pivot. They can switch over to soybeans, and here's the genius of it. Soybeans are these amazing little biological factories that literally pull their own nitrogen right out of the air. When fertilizer costs are sky high, that is a massive economic advantage. And here's the crucial point. This isn't just one farmer making a choice in a vacuum. It's thousands of them, all across the country, making the same calculation. And when all those individual decisions add up, it actually changes the national supply of grain. If everyone plants less corn, the supply of corn gets tighter. And what happens then? Basic economics. A tighter supply pushes the price up. So the very act of trying to cut costs can end up boosting their revenue.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. Okay, that sounds great in a textbook, but does it really work like that in the real world? Well, yeah, it does. We have proof. We've actually seen this exact scenario play out before, which brings us to history's surprising lesson.
Take a look at this. Remember 2022, the Russia-Ukraine war? It caused a very similar kind of shock to energy and fertilizer markets. The orange bars here show the price of urea, a key fertilizer. Look at that spike. It went absolutely nuclear. But now, look at the blue line on the exact same chart. That's the price of corn. And here's the wild part. As those fertilizer costs went through the roof, the price farmers were getting for their grain shot up right alongside it. They moved almost in lockstep. The revenue side of the equation was responding to the cost shock in real time. So what was the final result? What was the bottom line from that crazy year? Well, look at this. 2022, a year that by all rights should have been a disaster for farmers, ended up being a near record year for U.S. net farm income. It hit about $160 billion. For the farm economy as a whole, higher prices more than covered the higher costs.
But, and this is a really big but, that huge positive national number doesn't tell the whole story.
A shock like this never hits everyone the same way. The impact is really uneven. So let's break down who wins and who loses in a situation like this.
It really boils down to two things: timing and what you grow. The farmers who are protected, they're the planners, the ones who are savvy enough to lock in their fertilizer prices last fall before the crisis. The folks most at risk waited to buy their supplies. And of course, corn-heavy farms are the most exposed because of that crop's thirst for nitrogen. And we can't forget about livestock producers. They get squeezed too, because the price of the grain they need for feed goes up.
So as this whole situation unfolds in 2026, what should you be looking for? The story's still being written, right? But I'm going to give you 3 key signals you can watch to track it just like an expert.
Okay, first up, the USDA's Prospective Plannings Report on March 31st. Circle that date. It's going to be our first real, hard data on how many farmers are actually making that switch from corn to soybeans. Second, just keep your eye on the price of crude oil. Is that initial spike holding, or is it starting to come back down? And third, and this is the big one, the status of the Strait of Hormuz. Is it open for shipping again? Those 3 things will tell you almost everything you need to know.
So, we come back to that big question. Is this a cost crisis or a revenue boom? And the fascinating truth is, it's both. It's both things happening at the exact same time. It's a really complex economic story where, strangely enough, adversity can create its own surprising opportunities. For American agriculture, the story of 2026 is really just getting started.